Join us as we cover the offseason to-do list for Goody, Matt LaFleur, Jordan Love, and company. These things must be done to contend for a title in 2025.
Yeah, I've been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better. Okay. Hey. Yeah. Ain't no errors, baby. It's a new era. I wake up early feeling rich like I'm cash.
Welcome in another episode. Sounds Gouda. Thank you, everyone, for coming back and taking a listen to us. I'm one of your two co-hosts. My name is Rob Ralph. Next to me is my best friend, Jordan Olson. We are very excited to talk Packers again with you this week. Just know that in season, we do have new episodes every Wednesday and Saturday on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Please make sure to give us a like, sub, and follow us on those platforms. We would greatly appreciate it. So, on today's episode, we have a full checklist for you guys to cover off on a big off season for the Green Bay Packers. Jordan, I don't think that there's any better place to start than Jordan Love's development.
Yeah, so on today's list, I mean, this is not an exhaustive, 25-point list that, will encompass the season, including, every draft pick and decision that we'll make. But these are 9 things that we think the Packers need to do to contend and ultimately hoist that Lombardi in 2025, right? So as you mentioned, the first thing on our list is for Jordan Love's development to take the next step that we all expected to hopefully kind of see in 2024. As we recently know, Tom Clements retired and ended his, illustrious NFL career. At this point in time, it's to be seen who will be his replacement. I know that they hired Sean Mannion as a potential succession plan for that, but he hasn't. Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think he's been appointed or hired as the replacement yet. Have you seen that?
No, not yet. But it's definitely going to come. I'd be shocked if it didn't come from internally. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that they hired that guy to work with Jordan, and I guess they're probably going to make sure that he's comfortable with Sean Mannion. But he's got some things to kind of shore up. Obviously, with him injured last year, that kind of hampered his development at times. We've talked about this on previous pods, that I think there were times when he was worried about taking a sack, and some decisions he made probably were a result of injury. But hopefully he can eliminate some of those stupid plays that we saw, a couple of the pick sixes, just trying to make a play and make something happen, and were pretty costly in a couple big games. In my opinion, I think he's got to get a little bit more accurate on some of his outbreaking throws. I think on most of the time when the Packers run those routes, he's in a 3 or 5 step drop. And I think Jordan Love has been better when he's been playmaking with his feet and he kind of throws off script. I think if he works on his footwork and his natural 3, 5, and 7 step drops and hitting those outbreaking routes, that will be a big upgrade in his accuracy and hopefully his receivers helping him catch the ball. And then with his voice too, Matt LaFleur called for him to be a more vocal leader. I think he's got the command and the respect of the team, but I think there's times when he can use his voice to insert some more accountability, preparation, and things like that. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later in the show. Lots more to that, but in a nutshell, that's step number 1.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. Definitely needs to be more accurate for sure. I think there's pre-Toyotathon Jordan Love and post-Toyotathon Jordan Love. It tells a completely different story, which if you did that throughout the year, you would absolutely see. One thing I'd just add in there too, and I'm not saying he's got to be Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, but I think if he adds a little bit of mobility, if he's not injured, if he's healthy, he adds in just a little bit more ability or that kind of guess of him being able to run out of the pocket just a little bit. And I think that there was a play or two against the Eagles he could have taken off and possibly getting the first down. I would think that would add another cool element to his game and be able to keep the defense a little bit off guard.
Yeah, totally. And you know what? He's there. He's a top 10, borderline top 10 guy. By some metrics, he's a top 5 guy. But, the eye tests and some of those things. I mean, what we know about Jordan is that he can come back and he can win you a game, even if there's 45 seconds left on the clock. So his resiliency is clutch. Just kind of needs to be more consistent throughout the rest of the game. So point number 2, we don't have many of these on the list. But our one must re-sign, and we're going to be talking about Packers free agents in our next episode, our one must re-sign player is Brandon McManus. So tell me about that, Rob.
I mean, what else is there to say? He only missed two field goals this year. Unfortunately, one of them was in the postseason, the first time ever for him. But he brought some consistency. We were playing musical cheers, insert this kicker, draft this kicker, sign this kicker. We saw that quite a bit with a lot of other teams, and obviously, injuries don't help that for some other teams though. But like, he brought, plain and simple, he made his field goals. He brought some consistency. I'm not saying he's Mason Crosby, but he's brought a Mason Crosby-esque type of leadership and consistency with his kicking. So it's literally a no-brainer to me.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We're not going to beat a dead horse there. I think everybody knows why that needs to happen. And we've got a really serious 2-year window, and I wouldn't mess around with experimenting at that position at this point in time. Point number 3, we're going to have a lot of positions to, potentially look to upgrade this offseason. But, whether it's through the draft or free agency, I think that the areas or the positions that we can improve the most would be cornerback, defensive end or edge, center, defensive tackle, and wide receiver. Obviously, there's a lot of conversation about Jair Alexander. We're going to touch on that a little bit more in a bit. Eric Stokes. So there's going to be some changeover at that position likely. We know our edge rush wasn't as good as we would like it to be throughout the season, and if we got a little bit more pressure there, that probably would help our secondary and get some stops. We don't know what's going to happen with Josh Myers, but if there is a spot on our offensive line that we could improve, center would be one of those, and he is an upcoming free agent. TJ Slayton's departure potentially at defensive tackle makes that a need. And we all know, unfortunately, now with Christian Watson's injury that, we're probably fine in terms of bodies, but we may be missing that speed that's going to take the top off the defense from the wide receiver position. So, I don't know, you have anything to add to those notes? We're going to dive into all of that more in depth in future shows, but.
No, spot on. Absolutely. A cornerback and defensive end or edge being the most important. Yeah, I think that we will at some sort of capacity too as well for all these positions. But yeah, I'm in agreement with this.
So our 4th point, add offensive line depth. And some of that has to do with that impending free agent decision with Josh Myers. But we all saw what happened there at the end of the season of the playoffs against the Eagles. What do you make of that, Rob? And what's your 30-second plan of attack for offensive line depth?
Yeah, so you could go at this more than a few different ways. We'll get into the free agents and sort of that type of stuff, or different types of signings that we could do as far as center goes. Obviously, there's some, good draft prospects. Now, it's debatable and subjective whether, you think that those center prospects are really good or really bad, but you could play some musical chairs with the line. You could move Elton Jenkins to center. You could insert your first-round talent from this last year, Jordan Morgan at left guard. We know that Jacob Monk is also going to be going into year 2, who showed a lot of talent. We've seen Sean Ryan play some center. So you could do a whole bunch of different things. But when you get into a situation where you lose a really good left guard in Elton Jenkins, it's going to be extremely important. And injuries, you can never count on that, right? But to have that depth for that backup of quality play that you can add in and not miss a beat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Andre Dillard didn't really get it done. I think he kind of knew that early on, and he was just going to be a body. But then when, due to injury, you got to go to a guy like Travis Glover in a key situation. Now he'll be a second-year player. Jacob Monk will be a second-year player. Jordan Morgan was hurt. I still think that they need a little bit more depth there. So, point number 5 at this point in time, we need to grow up. What do I mean by that? So, we are the youngest team, but, that adage is over. We're not a young team anymore. We've been in the playoffs in back-to-back years. We've won a playoff game. We've lost a playoff game, a couple tough playoff games now, and we've had some big regular season matchups that we have not been able to step up and execute in. So what do I mean by grow up? Accountability, practice habits, discipline. These players that are going into their 3rd and 4th years need to decide they're vets, and they need to prepare, practice, and come into games acting like they're vets, expecting to win that game. So I don't know. You have more to say on that, Rob?
Yeah, no, that's just it. We're not going to be, I mean, maybe we'll be close to it, but the youngest team this next year, I'd be surprised if we're 3 years in a row, but it might happen. You never know. This team's got a lot of experience playing in these games. They've had a couple now playoff games together, unfortunately, coming in losses, but I mean, you're spot on. And if something needs to change within that culture, I'm really hoping Matt LaFleur can address that and add in the right people to help this group grow up and be more accountable.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of that's going to come within, though. Matt LaFleur talked about a few guys, Jordan Love. Tucker Kraft kind of took accountability for himself. I think in year 3, he's going to feel more confident in that. Yeah. I think you'll see Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney as second-year players on that team feel more comfortable with that. I'm just hoping that comes to fruition, right? So point number 5. Point number 6, there's a lot of extension candidates this offseason. So, Rob, which is our guy that we have to extend? There's a lot of options, but we decided there was one that we have to extend.
Yeah, this is pretty easy. Probably top 5. Jordan, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but top 5 right tackle in the league. So Zach Tom, I mean, his play was just evident throughout the year. Consistent, really good and high PFF grade for those of you who use those types of metrics and analysis for your reporting on players. But just a stalwart, a little bit on the lighter side for Zach Tom. So I know that there were some concerns with that, but only probably, and I don't even really know if you'd consider a down game, but only had maybe 1 or 2 of those throughout the year. But he's just absolutely a must extend and means a lot to this Packers offensive line and is definitely an anchor for it. So,
yeah, a guy who probably should have been a Pro Bowler, in my
100%.
opinion, definitely should have been an All-Pro second-team player. And, we know how that voting works. You usually get that recognition both in the Pro Bowl and the, all AP, All-Pro awards a year after it's due, especially on the offensive line. But he's a top 5 tackle in this league. Top 3 right tackle in this league, in my opinion, and he's entering what will be year number 4. We got to lock him down for another 4 years. He's going to be the anchor on this offensive line for years to come. Decide what to do with Jair Alexander. And, somewhat Kenny Clark, I put that note on here. I think that conversation has cooled a little bit with them. A lot of the conversation around the defensive line, firing Jason Reverovich, I think they're going to try to get some more productivity out of Kenny despite his pretty mediocre year. But what do the Packers do with Jair Alexander? Because that's a big decision that they need to make, Rob.
You got to let him go. It's just my opinion. He's a fantastic corner when he is healthy. So let me just say that has nothing to do with his performance and everything to do with him being available and on the field for his team, which I think at least half, if not more of the time throughout his tenure with the Packers, he has not been available. It's unfortunate. It's part of the game. Totally understand. Some people get hit by it worse than others. Insert your Christian Watson too as well, right? Other guys that can't really catch a break. Same thing with Jair Alexander. But at this point, you got to let him walk.
Yeah, and I think the biggest differences between Christian Watson and Ja right now is Ja's massive contract that we could be investing into other players and resources. And then just the weird off-the-field stuff, obviously what happened in Carolina last year and wherever he's at with his mentality right now, I've got nothing good to say. So who knows? But I agree. I think it's time to decide to move on from Jair Alexander. All right. This is going to be a fun point, but I don't think the Packers have to add 2 or 3 or 4 impact guys to make the Super Bowl next year, but I do think that they need to add 1 splash player. And there's a lot of conversation out there about where the Packers need to add. I know a lot of people are pounding the drum for a true number 1 wide receiver like a Devontae Adams or a T. Higgins. My 1 splash player I would like to add would be Maxx Crosby. And I know we talked about defensive end or edge as an area of improvement. And you're probably saying, Jordan, Maxx Crosby is a Las Vegas Raider right now, so how can you add him? I put this out on X a while ago, but I actually think that there's a world where two distressed assets could be traded for each other that have almost identical contracts, identical ages, and put them both in a situation with a fresh start. And I think that you could trade Jair Alexander for Maxx Crosby. The Packers might have to sweeten that with like a 3rd-round pick. Actually, Maxx Crosby's contract is even a little lighter in the second year that he has remaining left on his deal by a few $1 million. So I think that him opposite of Rashawn Gary would just be a dynamic duo. And then if you have Enyobari and Cox and LVN rotating in behind them, man, that would be a hell of a situation. But I know you had a different idea, Rob. So what's your idea to add a splash player?
Yeah, I know. Let me first off say I'd be absolutely so ecstatic if we got Maxx Crosby for Jair Alexander. If we just got Maxx Crosby for a couple of, whatever. I would be just blown away for this, right? But I'm like, okay, the two biggest free agents, and I'm going to try and keep this as short and sweet as possible, so not linger on this for a while, but the two biggest free agents that the Packers have ever signed are what? Charles Woodson, right? After that, few years, Super Bowl, and then Reggie White. So a few years after they signed him, Super Bowl, right? So high impact, still very good players that are absolute studs and triple stars on the defense, specifically for the Packers. So my point is this. I think that a Myles Garrett, yes, I know, please don't shut off the show yet, a Myles Garrett type of signing would be absolutely Reggie White, Charles Woodson-esque. What is turning?
He's 30. He's going to be 30 next season. So and when you say signing, you mean trade for, because he is a member of the Cleveland Browns right now.
Yes. Absolutely. So he's the best edge player in the game right now. The Cleveland Browns are one of the worst organizations in the league. I don't think anybody can discount that from what they did with Deshaun Watson alone, and they're consistent going through GMs and coaches and whatnot, even though Kevin Stefanski. But anyway, so yes, you would have to give up a ton for Myles Garrett, right? I understand. Probably a couple first rounders, maybe a little bit of splash on that, and then take on his massive salary. But Can you only imagine what that would do for the Green Bay Packers and Jeff Hafley in this 4-3 defense? It would be absolutely Reggie White and Charles Woodson-esque type of signing, and would be an absolute wreck, and be able to teach those other young guys how to be able to play. So I say the Packers, just for once, go out and do a home run, baby. Goody, you haven't been in on your first round picks anyways here the last couple of years, so why not? That's my point. It won't happen, but I'd love to see it happen.
I love the take, and I love the idea of what that could bring for the Packers in the next 2 years particular, right? After that, he'd be over the age of 32. He's probably the kind of player that would play well until 34, but I don't know. I don't see us giving up multiple first-round picks for a player on the wrong side of 30. Totally love your point about Reggie White, because he was 32 when he joined the Packers, but he signed as a free agent, and we didn't have to give up any assets to get him. But you throw all that out the window and you just add Myles Garrett to this defense. It's a hell of an idea.
Oh my gosh.
So
it'd be amazing.
Last point, and we'll get you out of here. Matt LaFleur needs to decide who this team is on offense. Arguably maybe his worst year as a play caller. I think he needs to find some little bit more slam dunk plays in the passing game. He really wanted to be a running team. I think we've discussed this before. I think the Packers have always had the most success when they're a pass-first team and use the run to complement that. Also needs to decide who he wants to be on fourth downs, go-for-it situations. Are we going to, I think you got to pick a route. Are we going to lean into the metrics and go by the metrics on fourth downs, or are we going to go with our gut? Because this gut thing and kind of wavering back and forth, it kind of bit us in the butt this year. So go all in, go for it on all the fourth downs if you're going to do it, or let's take the points, be conservative, and decide who we are in that regard. So those are the 9 points. Just to recap that really quick: complete Jordan Love's development, sign Brandon McManus, improve corner, DN, center, D tackle, and wide receiver through the draft or free agency, add more offensive line depth, grow up, we're not a young team anymore, extend Zach Tom, decide what we're going to do with Jair Alexander, add one splash player, and Matt LaFleur deciding how he wants to lead this team on offense. So really quick before we go, we got big championship games coming up this weekend. So Rob, who do you want to see in the Super Bowl, and who would you like to see winning?
I think all of America would love to see the Bills and Commanders, with the Bills winning their first Super Bowl. Obviously, that'd be the true underdog type of story. I think the Bills are due, right? They're 0-4 in a Super Bowl anyways. And Josh Allen and that team, you know, he's 0-3 in January against the Chiefs in Arrowhead, which is where it's always been, unfortunately. So just, if anything, somebody please just beat the Chiefs. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, this probably won't be a popular take for Packers fans, but from just a pure entertainment standpoint, I'd like to see the Bills and the Eagles in the Super Bowl, with the caveat that the Bills got to win it. I don't want to see the Eagles win it, but from an entertainment standpoint, I think those are probably the two best teams remaining in the playoffs at this point in time. Anybody but the Chiefs. But I'm pulling for the Bills to get it done. There's a lot of similarities between that franchise and fan base and the people of Buffalo, the people of Green Bay. So let's go Bills. But that's all we got from you. I hope you enjoyed the show. Hopefully we see some of these things, or most of these things we talked about on this to-do list, come to fruition this offseason. But just remember, we've got more content every Wednesday and Saturday. As always, thanks for listening. Make sure to share this with somebody who you think would appreciate it. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure to hit subscribe, like, comment, let us know what you think. You can connect with us on X. Rob's at Sounds Gouda with 3 A's, and I'm at Olson Jord. But until next time, Packers Nation, have a Gouda morning, a Gouda afternoon, and a Gouda night. Go Pack.
Go Pack.
Been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better. Okay. Hey.